Nottoway County 911. What is your emergency?
My daughter's dead.
What's wrong?
She's laying on the ground, just blood everywhere.
She held the baby close like any proud new mother, but it wasn't hers. On January 13, 2021, Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection in Terre Haute, Indiana, the first woman in nearly 70 years to face the federal death penalty. Her crime? Unthinkable.
We'll look at her eyes here to see how bright and how big her smile is.
It was December 16, 2004, when the quiet farming town of Skidmore, Missouri, was shattered by an act so grotesque it left seasoned FBI agents struggling for words. Bobby Jo Stinnett was 23, a dog breeder expecting her first child, and deeply involved in a small but close-knit online rat terrier community. It was through this virtual world that she connected with someone using the name Darlene Fisher. They shared emails, planned a visit, and arranged for the supposed adoption of a puppy. But the woman behind the screen wasn't a pet lover. She was Lisa Montgomery. Montgomery arrived at the Stinnett home just after noon. She was calm, dressed for winter, and carrying a rope and a kitchen knife in her purse. What happened inside that house is difficult to comprehend. After gaining Bobby Jo's trust and being invited in, Montgomery attacked. She wrapped a pink neon rope around Bobby Jo's neck, strangling her until she lost consciousness. But Bobby Jo didn't die immediately. She fought back, scratched, kicked, pleaded. Lisa then retrieved the knife and, in one of the most disturbing acts of violence imaginable, cut into the still living woman's abdomen, performing a crude cesarean section on the living room floor.
Worst things I'd seen done to a human, maybe. Marks on the face, where the face had been hit. You see ligature marks left on the neck, and then of course the huge gaping wound in the abdomen.
The baby girl was removed, wrapped in a blanket, and taken. Bobby Jo lay dying in a pool of her own blood, helpless, mutilated, and alone. Montgomery cleaned the infant, cut the umbilical cord, and drove across the state line into Kansas. There she called her husband and others to report that she had just given birth at a women's clinic. She posed for photos with the newborn, smiled, held the baby close like any proud new mother.
Lisa told me that she cut the cord, held it between her fingers, put the baby inside her coat, and went out the door and got in her vehicle and drove off.
But the timeline didn't match. Investigators were quick to piece together the digital evidence. IP addresses, email logs, and forum threads led directly to Montgomery's home in Melbourne, Kansas. The following day, January 17th, FBI agents knocked on her door. Inside, they found Lisa cradling the baby girl, alive, healthy, and unaware of the nightmare that had brought her into the world. Lisa surrendered peacefully, reportedly saying only, "Here she is." The trial was harrowing. Prosecutors argued that the crime was calculated, premeditated, and monstrous. The motive? To fake a pregnancy in order to win back custody of her children and keep her husband from leaving her. They told the court that Montgomery had pretended to be pregnant for months, going so far as to wear padding under her clothes, and needed a real baby to complete the illusion. But her defense attorneys painted a different picture, one that shocked even courtroom veterans. Lisa's childhood had been a waking nightmare. She was repeatedly raped by her stepfather beginning at age 11, sometimes multiple times a week. Her mother, upon learning of the abuse, threatened her with a gun and accused her of lying. Later, Lisa was trafficked by her mother to adult men in exchange for plumbing work or rent. She developed complex PTSD, bipolar disorder, and brain damage due to fetal alcohol syndrome. One doctor described her as one of the most profoundly mentally ill persons he had ever evaluated, but the jury didn't waver. In 2007, Montgomery was found guilty of federal kidnapping, resulting in death, and sentenced to death.
Montgomery is the first woman executed in the U.S. federal prison system in almost 70 years. Her lawyers argued that due to a debilitating mental illness brought on by years of physical and sexual abuse, she couldn't comprehend why she was to be executed.
For nearly 14 years, her case wound through the court system. Multiple appeals were filed and denied. Mental health experts and human rights organizations, including the United Nations, urged clemency. They argued that Lisa's illness made her incapable of fully understanding her actions or the punishment she faced. Still, in the final weeks of the Trump administration, her execution date was set, January 12, 2021. Inside Terre Haute, Lisa Montgomery awoke in her isolated death watch cell. The temperature outside hovered near freezing. Snow drifted across the grounds, but inside, the hours ticked away with brutal certainty. She was watched around the clock by guards who checked on her every 15 minutes. Her meals were served through a slot in the door. She was not allowed any visitors except for her legal team and spiritual advisor. That day, Montgomery spent most of her time in silence. According to her attorneys, she appeared to be slipping between reality and delusion, muttering to herself, imagining people who weren't there, and struggling to understand what was happening.
This is a devil come back to earth disguised as Lisa Montgomery. I have no remorse for her. She just needs to be done.
She didn't request a special last meal. Instead, she was given the standard prison fare: chicken with gravy, corn, mashed potatoes, and a soda. She finished it quietly. No comments. No emotion. Later that evening, she made a brief phone call to her sister. The two spoke for less than 10 minutes. Lisa told her to take care of the girls, referring to her children, and said she loved them. Her voice was low. She didn't cry. At 1:31 a.m., January 13th, Montgomery was led from her cell to the execution chamber. She wore a beige pantsuit and had her hair combed down neatly, parted at the center. Her ankles were shackled, her wrists bound. Inside the sterile room, she was strapped onto a padded gurney, arms outstretched, secured by thick leather restraints. The fourth lines were inserted slowly, deliberately. The air was tense. A glass window separated the execution room from the witness gallery. Behind the glass stood reporters, federal officials, and a spiritual advisor. When asked if she had any last words, Lisa responded simply and quietly, "No."
Well, I do not think that someone in that state of mind should be held responsible for their acts.
The execution began at 1:34 a.m. Pentobarbital surged through her veins. Her chest rose quickly at first, then slowed. Her lips began to turn blue. Her fingers twitched. She gasped slightly and then went still. By 1:45 a.m., Lisa Montgomery was declared dead. There were no cheers outside, no celebrations, no firecrackers like in Bundy's execution, just cold air and silence. A handful of protesters stood by candlelight near the prison's front gate. Some held signs reading, "Justice for Bobby Joe." Others held placards that said, "Stop executing the mentally ill." The country remained bitterly divided.
Lisa's abuse was as extreme as I've ever seen.
To many, Lisa Montgomery was a monster, a woman who had committed an act so grotesque it defied understanding. To others, she was a victim herself, failed repeatedly by a system that never intervened, not as a child, not as a mother, and not in her final hours. Victoria Joe, the baby who survived, is now a teenager, raised by her father, and shielded from the media spotlight. Her mother's final moments were stolen, but her life was saved. Did Lisa Montgomery deserve to die? Was her execution justice or a failure of mercy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.